sure, it would be he and Principal Andy Hare as well, our two high school principals, who have asked to make a presentation this evening to the board. And at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Ms. Masalowski, and good afternoon, board. Mr. Hare is handing out to you
Brent, you have that working.
It's on. I'll turn it up a little bit more so we get some talking to it. How's that? Is that better?
Might just get it closer to your mouth.
I don't think I can get any closer.
Right?
I'm
Take
not a
it.
good person.
Hit you over the head, so.
Mr. Hare just handed to you a proposal that our high schools would like for you to consider going into our September school board meeting. If you flip over to the second page, we would like to kind of briefly talk about some points of interest before we get into the policy that we would like for you to consider. Attendance in our high schools continues to be of great importance and concern. First and foremost, students must be present and engaged to learn. Last year, Westridge High School had an overall ADA of 91.1%, and Sullivan East High School had an overall ADA of 92.2%. As part of accountability measures established by the Tennessee Department of Education, chronic absenteeism is reported on each school and district report card. For the 2021-2022 school year, Sullivan County Schools had a chronic absentee rate of 23%. Additionally, BEP funding is directly tied to each school's average daily attendance. Our district goal for 2022-2023 is that every school reach a 95% average daily attendance rate and 0% in chronic absenteeism. On that second page in the middle, you see a tiered system of support for improving attendance that we have been working on very hard in our schools, including the two high schools, this week. As part of that tiered intervention support system, we are looking for and we're looking at various forms of incentives and consequences for students who are coming to school and those that are not coming to school. One incentive mentioned most often as we have talked to students, faculties, families, etc., over the last several weeks has been that they would like to see the return of the exam exemption. Many students have told us over the last little bit, and teachers, that they would not miss school if that exam exemption were in place. We do feel like this exam exemption, along with the other school-based incentives, will bolster our ADA and help us get to that goal of 95%. I know that there are many questions, things to think about, things to ponder as you do this, but on the front we have drafted a proposal that is very similar to the policy that was in place before it was removed a few years ago. But basically it states that students may be exempt from a final exam if they have an 80 or higher average, have missed 2 days or less of instruction in a semester-long or year-long class, and that each teacher will be responsible for tracking attendance in their class. And so we do ask that the board consider this proposal and help us offer what we believe is one of the more important attendance incentives to help us reach our goal of 95% in terms of average daily attendance. Mr. Hare and I are both here to answer any questions that you may have related to this, or if we need to discuss some things that maybe come up when we did away with this, those kinds of things. So we're happy to field any questions that you have.
One piece of information I will add to the dialogue is the definition of chronic absenteeism. Would you like to elaborate on that, Dr. Davis?
Sure, that's all absences. So we're not just looking at medical notes, principal excused absences, those kinds of things, but the chronic absenteeism looks at all absences across the board, regardless of whether or not there's an excuse. And then for the year, we're looking at 10%.
Have you looked at the details of tardies, for example? I'm not sure if the old policy requires a certain number of tardies equal to one absence, because that's always been a major issue when someone comes in so many minutes late or half a period, are they present, are they absent?
And we've had quite a few of those conversations this week as we have been trying to tier support systems in terms of what incentives we would like to offer outside of the exam exemption. We're looking at losses of privileges in terms of extracurriculars, proms, athletics, graduation ceremony, all of the different things that other systems in our area are doing. One of the things that keeps popping up are the tardies. And so how many tardies from a time standpoint would equal an absence? The old policy, I'm not sure if it had it in it or not. We took this from the old, and the one that we saw did not, but that doesn't mean that it didn't at some point. But I think it would be a benefit to have that in there as well.
My experience, that was a major problem, trying to keep track of it, so if we have it up front, know what it is, make sure that we do not confuse, whether it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes for class period.
If you don't mind, if I could address that real quick, a suggestion, a recommendation could be that it mirror what our tardy policy is regarding once it gets to the in-school suspension level. So an in-school suspension due to tardies would equal an absence according to exam exemption. That could be a suggestion.
Say again what you just said about
Once a student gets in-school suspension due to the tardies based on the number, that could, for exam exemption issues, count as an absence. So if they were served in-school suspension more than 2 days due to tardies, then they would not be exempt from exams. That's a suggestion.
I have a couple questions. So maybe you may not know this off the top of your head. Do you have any idea, either one of you, had we had attendance at the rate we're shooting for, how much more money revenue we would have brought in at the high schools, and then the follow-up?
I think they both ought to know that right
Well,
off the top.
Over $1 million is what we've lost in ADA.
Okay. I heard that number floated out. $1 million, and that's just your high school?
No, that's for the district.
No, for the district. Okay. For your individual school. $1 million gives us an idea.
But your highest chronic absenteeism rate will be at high school.
And that million, was that based on the 95% or the 95% that our goal is, or 100%?
Yep. There hasn't been a calculation that I have done to respond to that question.
And finally, one final point. One thing I would caution when we see the final version of this policy, that we leave some room for discretion, because an absence or somebody's got a serious injury or something is different than somebody's got a string of single days and things like that.
Yeah, and typically with, more so in terms of the consequences when we're looking at attendance and the loss of privileges, we certainly weigh in any type of excuses counted in that. It does not count against the student, so medical notes, those kinds of things, we would require doctors.
I guess I have a problem with it because it's one of the things I actually was totally against when we had the policy, and I was trying to get it away, and we did get away with it, but we get away from it. The problem I have is that we're telling people all you have to do is show up and you're going to have to take a test. And once they go to college, they're not prepared for exams. They've never had to take one. They've never had to take a 9 weeks. They've never had to take a semester exam. And both my daughters went all the way through high school and never took a single exam until they made it to college and had no idea how to prepare for it. So I'm opposed to it just for that main reason. I mean, it's great that we're saying here's an incentive to come to school, but their incentive's already there. This isn't, I can say the only way we're going to get you to come to school is not make you take a test. I still have a problem with that, is that we're going to say that our goal is to get you through high school, but once you're through high school, you're not prepared for the next step, which is the college. And I mean, we had one of my really good friends came to me. His daughter had a 36 on the ACT. She got a full ride to Vanderbilt and almost washed out, almost failed out her first semester and had to go into tutoring. And she's a doctor. I mean, she's a very intelligent person. Had no idea how to prepare for an exam. And I think that our school system has a responsibility to prepare these students for the next step, not just to graduate them, to say, hey, we're here and we're good to go. It can't be about the money. It can't be about those things. I mean, we have to prepare them for the next step. So I'm opposed to it. I understand what you're trying to do. I really am. But if all we're going to do is push them through and not prepare them for the next step, it's not good.
So certainly, and if I've made that point, I apologize. We're looking holistically at the child, and everything that we do and everything that we're doing day in and day out is about their learning, and that is our focus. Some points to add to that, and some things that have happened over the last several years since this conversation last took place, and I think Mr. Hayer's got some more information as well to share about the exams and those kinds of things. But I do want to add, first and foremost, at Westridge High School, we have over 400 students that are enrolled in dual enrollment courses, this year coming up. We know that about 20% of our students are college bound. For the most part, that 20% are already enrolled in college courses in our high school. So they're taking exams, they're preparing for what they're going to experience as they get to college moving forward. They're taking, this exam exemption would not take the place of whatever ETSU or Northeast State is requiring in the classroom already. This is just for our high school courses. So for our college-bound students, the attendance requirements of the college, the exams that they have to take at the college level, they're doing, and they're already doing as high school students. Second of all, we have a number of exam type assessments that we're giving to students regularly. We are doing regular benchmark assessments that are very much like an end of course exam. They're taking us at the beginning of a semester, they're taking us throughout the semester so that we can watch what they're doing, we can guide in instruction and make sure that we're meeting those needs. So our students are assessed quite often and quite regularly with exam type situations. So I do believe, and that point is very fair and very valid, I do believe that we are assessing students at a level to where they should not be getting to college and they never see the type of exam that we're talking about or that they will see. In fact, in many of our classes, what they're getting from us in terms of either the assessments that we're giving and or the coursework, especially in the AP realm, is harder than what they're going to experience their freshman year in college. And so I know Dr. Mr. Harry had more to add.
No, I think you had nailed that in there. And a lot has changed too, especially in the last couple of years with what are happening at the college and university levels when it comes to their final exams. A lot of them are now moving towards more of a project-based type of end-of-course exam, so to speak. But like Dr. Davis was saying, we are probably the most tested group of people in the world right now in our public schools with our end-of-course exams and benchmark assessments we do. So that's why I feel like this would be satisfactory and wouldn't affect their preparedness at the next level. But that's all I was going to add.
Well, I understand completely what you're saying as far as we're testing the depth, and I agree. There's a lot of state testing that goes on, but the students, there's really no accountability for those tests. It's mostly that's coming back to us, and not so much on them. I mean, they don't have to prepare for those tests.
It's part of their assessment and their grading. There's no exemption to that.
And Mr. Arson, I do believe that, and again, I'm not arguing, but I do believe that over the last several years, and especially moving into this year, we are really trying to beef up the way that we assess our students, that it's not just something else aside that they do and then they never see it again. Our teachers, we're giving benchmark assessments. Our teachers are coming right back in when we get those results. They're reviewing those results, and then they're doing something with those. They're reviewing those results with students. They're tailoring what they're doing at the end of lessons. If they're in an Algebra 1 classroom, they may have 45, 50 minutes of an Algebra 1 lesson. And then the last part of that block, which is a 90-minute class, for 30, 45 minutes, they're working on gap skills from what those assessments were. So, our students are not only taking assessments, but they are then having to use whatever those assessments are saying to hopefully increase their knowledge and understanding.
And I mean, I applaud what you're doing. I really do, and I applaud what the teachers do. So I know what they're doing is fantastic to get all the scores and things up, but it still doesn't present something that they have to look at a 6 weeks or 9 weeks or a semester worth of information and get prepared for a final exam, which is what they are going to have to do at the next level. I agree. I understand what you're saying. I understand the point you're trying to make, and I applaud you for finding a way. I just have a problem with that preparedness. And I mean, I experienced it with both my daughters. I experienced it. And I I experienced it with a lot of people that talked to me when this process was going on. It's that to sit back and say, all you have to do is come to school and you never have to take an exam. That's something that's really an overall cumulative exam. I'm saying the wrong words, but you understand what I'm saying. That there's nothing that makes them study for this overall course exam. Okay, we take a test, we find out what they're needing to do, and we're gonna work on that, and that's great, that's fantastic. But that doesn't give them something that they have to work on and say, this is how I prepare for a comprehensive exam.
I agree. Our benchmarks are cumulative, just like you're saying. And then in addition to that, you know, we've also added to that, not just the attendance piece that they have to come to school, but they've got to maintain a B average. And they can come to school and not miss a day, but if their overall grade is not a B or higher, then they're not exempt from those exams. So they're having to perform and to pay attention and to work and to study and to use these benchmark assessments that we're doing each and every day in order to keep that grade up. Because if their grade is not a B or higher, then they can't exempt those exams anyway, regardless of attendance.
You're in the course test, they do count as part of their final grade, do they not?
Correct. 15% of the final
50% final, so they do get a comprehensive exam, you take an independent course exam. And I can remember standing in your own shoes many years ago, arguing the same thing you're arguing, and I have long been a supporter of exam exemptions. Things have to be fine-tuned to make them look good, but sometimes one compromise we did was to do 2 out of 4. They could choose 2 out of 4 if they had their attendance as a way to accomplish what Mr. Iverson said, of letting at least have to experience a final exam. That helped a little bit. But I did see progress or improvement in attendance as a high school principal based on exam exemptions. And the rest of them, they can have exam exemptions. But and it got changed several times over the years. We have some bumps in the road, but we did make some improvements in that goal. We do have a goal, state goal, 99% attendance, I think. So it's a matter of what do we focus on. 99% attendance in the course exams, they have to take those regardless. There's something
So there's some non-EOC classes also.
right, and non-EOC are the ones that we primarily talking about.
Chairman Jones, if I could add, we did have exam exemptions when I was at East. And to just add, Dr. Davis and Mr. Harris, what you said, if I were in your shoes, I'd be fighting for the same thing. Just as Chairman Jones said, I'm not saying that necessarily that it's a win-win or a lose-lose. It's just a matter of trying to figure out the best way that you can to try to get kids to school and then to move forward the best you can. I do think that the opportunity to do this is better now than it was even when I was there at that time, because we did not have all the testing. That we didn't have benchmarks. We had DOCs. I forget what it was before EOCs. Gateway. We had those, but we didn't have benchmarks. We didn't have all the work that has to go into even being a student moved towards special ed that we have now. There's a whole lot more stopgaps, if you will, in place now to prepare students for testing beyond what the measures were back then. So I do think the opportunity is better now to have the experience that Mr. Iverson's talking about that we didn't have then. So I do think it's possibly a different game now than it was then.
Yes, and thank you for that. Our curriculum is stronger. Our teachers are meeting regularly to talk about assessments, to talk about our curriculum. You know, we are constantly having conversations with teachers about student learning and where they're at and what they need. And so I do agree with you.
Is there any data that indicates the difference between now and then that we could point to?
Dr. Palmer and I were trying to find that yesterday because, you know, we know what we think and what we see, but we're still trying to get those numbers for you as far as when the exam exemption was removed and then what that data looked like. The problem in there is going to be the couple of years of COVID where attendance was just all over the place.
And like I say, that could be relevant because some of the things that we have to deal with too.
That That's what I was gonna ask, is historically, the last 3 to 5 years before we took it out, what were our percentages at our high school, since that's the area where we're gonna see the most chronic absenteeism?
I can not give you specifics, but I can get you in the ballpark. At Sullivan East, for example, we were above the 92.2% we're at today. We were closer to the 95% range prior. I do know that.
The other three high schools were as well.
Have you checked with other school systems in the area? Are they going back to exam exemptions, or are they endeavoring to good?
I have talked to a few. One of our high schools are focusing more on loss of privileges, those kinds of things. We are looking at those and we are exploring those with Mr. Rafalowski. The one thing that we would like to see is more of a balanced approach than what the other systems do. We would like to have incentives for our students who are coming to school, not just loss of privileges for those that are not.
We don't need all the negative, we need is full positives.
Right. Which is what we're looking at. I mean, we're already talking about athletic passes starting in September at Westridge. Any kid that's not missed a single day of school will get an athletic pass and they can do anything they want to for free. We've had donations come in. We're going to start holding weekly drawings. We've had race tickets, gas cards, things like that. So we're looking at a plethora of things that we can offer incentive-wise for our kids who are coming to school, in addition to the loss of the ones that are not.
Under every once, Dr. Rouse, that they gave you that card.
We've heard about the car. Mr. Hare can maybe get a car. So far, I haven't been able to.
Is there, whenever you're looking for the data as far as trying to figure out where we were, what they're asking as far as graduation rate, are you gonna look at the graduates, what they did as far as the success rate, as far as how many went to college, how many succeeded? I mean, that would be the part that I'm concerned about, as far as, okay, what did our graduates do after they left us, not during the time? Because, I mean, if all we're doing again is talking about as long as you're at school, if that's our main concern, is not really preparing.
Right, and I agree. And again, we know about 20% of our graduates are going to college. We know that 20+% that go to college, about 18 actually graduate with a 4-year degree. And so within that, certainly we want to make sure that the 18%, 20% of our students who
trying to hire people because they'll never show up.
doing well in these classes and certain indications that they're
Marty was stubborn.
I only heard the part of the report, that's all I heard. And all this further in it has nothing to do with anything for the most part, but it brings back to mind, had a student at East High School, an old there, and something to remember her first name was Megan. She went on to YouTube and came back later to tell us she could have taught for English classes to kids. Because of English classes that she was doing. Mainly English classes. She didn't talk in English classes.
I have a small issue. Where if you when you're a hospital or Canada, I don't know.
I'm distracted.
I'm just trying to ask you, in your opinion, does it take time for something like this to kind of get entrenched in people's alone, or is it something that would take us or this year, people would catch on with it, and would that work that way?
with 1,800 kids, there's a, there are kids that will, there are kids that won't. It's for some it will take time. We hope to go back and start to talk about this with our students after this conversation, say, hey, this may be a possibility for this, and it's going to take some time to go back to any sort of systemic change is 3 to 5 years in terms of institutionalization. So for true change to occur and to see the result of the effects of that, then yeah, you're looking at 3 to 5 years. But I do believe something like this can have immediate effects. I was one of those. I did not miss more than 2 days of high school so that I did not have to take a bond.
I have one additional comment, and basically for clarification, I ask that you go back in your document and clarify that just to make sure there's no room for misunderstanding, and that is this a period by period? Attendance, exam, exemption,
Yes.
or this is daily? And
No,
I'd like
this-
for that to be clarified in the document.
Our conversation up to this point has been period by period.
Okay, and I would like to make sure that's very clear.
For it to work,
Because I know people don't believe it, but there are students that would stay with kind of a cover and with their out the door and hey, there's nothing to do.
So I would say if there are no further questions from the board, then thank you very much, Principal Hare, Principal Davis, for being here this afternoon, making this presentation. And with the board's wishes, if that is such, I'll add that to the September agenda, and we will continue further discussion, one of the two. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is Denise West. All of you know Ms. West very well. Denise is here to bring us back together on the facility assessment report that she has been working on with Indian Springs, Mary Hughes, and Sullivan East High. Once she completes her report, then we'll get into some additional information. But the next amount of time, no matter how much is needed, I wanted to go to Deneen for her presentation and for your questions. So Deneen, welcome and thank you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that you guys allowing me to be here and present this to you. I just wanted to go back over what the scope is, what our role was, so that you know what we are presenting. So we were asked to look at 3 schools, Indian Springs, Mary Hughes, and Sullivan East. And our goal is to take money that is allocated for each school and come back and tell you guys how we would spend that money. So I know that it is impossible to please everyone. And I know that there's going to be things that are not on this list that you would like to have on the list. But this is just a work session. It's just a place to start, and it's a shopping list, okay? So you'll be thinking in your mind, why can't we do this? Well, the answer is we can if it's within reason, within the budget. And maybe another question that you would ask is, can we do this? The same question, the same answer is that we can, but we will have to take something off the list and replace it with something else. So, just keep that in mind as we go forward, because we obviously know that it's not perfect. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind is that we are in a very different world than we were in a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever we were building the other schools. We're very, very fortunate that we got Westridge done. I don't know that we could have completed it in the climate that we're in today. So when we say things, $5 million sounds like a lot of money, but whenever you're going to see, when we chop this up, it does not go very far. And in each of these schools, we could definitely spend a lot more money. So again, our task is to try to spend your money as wisely as we can. It was myself, along with input from maintenance and mechanical, electrical, structural engineer. And so this is a collaboration of the effort of all of us together. So we'll begin with Indian Springs Elementary School.
And board members, all of you, each one of you have a blue folder. You'll open that. I think this folder will coincide and go along with the presentation. Thank you for that.
So the first school is Indian Springs Elementary School. And we'll go back to the site plan, the back one. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know if we need to dim lights or anything, but this is the site plan to Indian Springs Elementary School. If we look at this site plan, we see that as you come into the school from the north, it's a pinched entry point right there, and then it widens out as you come to the bottom of the page. There's really not anything that we can do within this budget to help that. But what we talked about doing was creating a new entry so that the school has a new identity. You'll see in the middle of the, can you point with your cursor, Evelyn, to like the raised portion, the raised roof there? Okay, so this is the original school. And then the school was added on over the years, with the final latest addition being the pod in the back, back in the pod, or however many size that is. So we are looking at primarily the front entry, and we're also looking primarily at HVAC and electrical items in the school. So keep in mind, we're going to show you in the next slides what we're recommending with an entry. So this is a floor plan of that center section that we talked about just a minute ago. And what we were looking at doing, this was actually Charlie's suggestion, was that the existing school, the entry that is in that pinch point that we told you about, is just not very welcoming, and it's not very obvious that that is the way into the school. So if you'll keep in mind that we are thinking, how do we accommodate ADA accessibility? Right now you have steps. There's no ramp to that area. You can only get in through other portions of the school. And we feel like we need that ADA presence in the front where we can get handicapped accessibility into the front and give it a new presence. I know the two photographs at the bottom might be a little bit hard to see, but one other really big factor with Indian Springs is that that older building that we're talking about has a lot of fire code issues. And the reason for that is because, of course, this building was built many years ago, it was built with wood floors. This is a major fire problem. It's on a crawl space. But there's also been issues with the floor in this area where there's been some sagging and it's actually been leaning towards the back. So what we're proposing to do is to rip this floor totally out. And you might say, what? And I understand, but what we're proposing is that we would lose the kindergartners for a school year. They could be relocated somewhere else, and that's primarily 4 kindergarten classrooms is what's in there now. So we would lose those for 1 school year so that this construction could take place. The wood floor would be ripped out, and we would put in a structural system in that crawl space, which is little stub columns and beams, and pour a concrete slab. And in that way, this area is put back to modern standards and meets your fire codes. So what do you get at the end of the day? At the end of the day, we're looking at, as you come into the school, in the area that's shown there in kind of the greenish yellow to the other side, would be a new administrative area. So this helps with your security. You come into a secure vestibule, and then you get checked in to the rest of the school, and the administration is located there right by the entry. The 3 remaining white areas are new kindergartens in the same place with new toilets. One of the other issues that we have, and I don't know if you can see in that photograph down in the lower bottom left, there are little wooden, I guess I call them readers' roosts in the kindergarten areas. These are also a fire code. So you can imagine if a fire happened in that wing of the building where you have your kindergartners, A, it shouldn't be on an upper level. And then C, if there was a fire, the stairs could be on fire. I think you get the picture. There's lots of, lots of big code problems. So we'd like to solve all those, put back decent handicapped restrooms and fresh new kindergarten spaces. On the far right side, where the old admin was, we would turn that into a kindergarten pod, again with the ADA toilet. So what I'll do is I'll go through each school and then we can come back. So let me just go on to other recommendations and then we'll come back and we'll just talk about Indian Springs. So the next slide shows you, this is the front of the school now. The drawing to the bottom is from 1954, which was the original drawing showing the entrance in the middle. So the way that the school was designed, you can see the gable roof there, that it mirrors what's there now, but it's kind of hidden now by the canopy and all the rest of the additions that have gone on. So this is a throwback to how the school was originally designed in the original presence of the school. So the next slide is going to show what it might look like. This shows you in the upper left-hand side, again, that's an existing photograph. And on the left side, in the bottom photo, show making a nice new prominent entry, so there's no mistake that that's how you get into school. It's covered. You will have your existing canopy that you have to the right and the left, but we're also creating this handicap ramp. The handicap ramp on the bottom, you can see there's a low wall there, and that ramp would be behind that wall. The next slide. Go ahead.
Just to is that the same entrance with the same location?
No, no, it's in the middle now, right? Yeah. So what you can see here is the top photograph is your existing entrance. So the stairs are in very poor condition. There is no ramp, and the handrails do not meet code. If you look at the bottom picture, that is that same area of the school, and now what we're doing again is we have the handicap ramp, but it's going back to that middle section, and so that it doesn't look like a door, we've made a little low wall, and that's a good naming opportunity where you can see signage Indian Springs Elementary School, and that would be an emergency exit or a staff exit, because the staff parking is to the side of that school. Okay, let's keep going. So now we get into the fun stuff, the MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So we've got some ADA issues with the plumbing. Basically, in pretty much the entire school, the handicapped, or there are no correct handicapped toilets. Okay, so this is some examples. You see the urinals there. No one could use the urinals that were handicapped. There's a step there, so that's a no-no. You can't get into a stall, and so just would basically put a new handicap stall and urinal as needed in each of the gang toilets. Then mechanical and electrical, I believe each one of you have a budget spreadsheet as well. I don't know if they got that as a handout or part of their computer. Okay, so it will be probably a little bit hard to read on the screen, but we can look at how we've allocated the funds next. And you'll see that that HVAC and electrical take up a large chunk. So if we just kind of briefly go down the list, we have handicap toilet upgrades, $340,000. The new entry and the structural modifications to retrofit the new slab. That's what I talked about, where we would rip out the old wood and put in a new concrete slab. That is about $509,000. The exterior ramp and step improvements would be about $250,000. Interior renovation of the administration. Remember, we're making a new administrative suite. That's $245,000. The new relocated kindergarten, $210,000. A little bit of money for signage. And then, Ellen, if you don't mind, I forgot to mention, can we go back to the floor plan and I'll tell you what I mean by ceiling upgrade, finishes, and painting. So right there, do you see the area that is gray area? That's about how far the money goes. It would be the new areas and the gray areas of the hallway. So at least that main core section of the building would have these upgraded finishes. And by upgraded, I mean new ceilings and painting and flooring. And I know that the little photograph at the bottom, the little thumbnail, it's hard to see, but when you walk into that school, there is like a golden mottled color, not very attractive at all, sprayed ceiling. It's not very welcoming. The lighting is terrible. So just by at least freshening up that part of the school, I think it's going to make a tremendous difference. So that's what we're talking about with that line item. And then some other various fire rating upgrades. That's the architectural portion of Indian Springs. So if we go on to electrical, I have a separate electrical report that goes with each one of these line items. But basically, we would be looking at putting in new LED lighting, doing new communications, branch wiring. Unfortunately, in Indian Springs, I know it's probably hard to see as well, but there is exposed conduit running down the hallways. IT wiring is just really, not inviting. And I know all of this takes money to replace, but you probably know these things already. But we'll at least be able to upgrade the whole school with lighting. And then life safety system upgrades. This is recommendations from our electrical engineer, which means that we would be upgrading fire alarm systems and things like that throughout the whole school that are just, the age of these schools, some of them, they vary 40, 50, 60 years old. They've lived their life and they don't meet code anymore and just really need to be replaced. If we look at HVAC, this takes up a large portion of the budget. So for this particular school, we're looking at installing new HVAC air conditioning, heat pumps, and so forth. That's a huge chunk, which is $500,000 for approximately 21 classrooms in the administrative areas. There's also some money in here to upgrade the plumbing fixtures to meet ADA standards in all the restrooms. So as we talked before, you don't have a compliant sink, you don't have a compliant urinal, you don't have a compliant toilet. These are just for the plumbing fixtures. And the other part that I talked about architecturally is how do you get rid of a concrete curb and how do you make the actual stall larger? Because a lot of times what you have to do is you go in and it takes 2 current plumbing fixtures to make 1 handicapped. So, And if we go on down the list, we're going to replace all the old cold and hot water piping with new piping. This is another issue that the schools have constantly with old piping in the schools, old sewer lines, things like that, just trying to upgrade and replace those type things. And then as you go on down, install ERV, which is an energy recovery ventilator units to provide preconditioned outside air to all the classrooms. One of the issues that you have as well is that when you have some of these older units, they don't bring fresh air into the building. And so you might have teachers complaining that their paper feels wet or is wrinkling, that kind of thing. So this helps with that, bring fresh air in. And then the final thing is to install a digital control system for the control motorization of the HVAC systems. We do have these in the newer schools. So there are, what did we leave off of here? I'm sure there's plenty of things. One of the things that we looked at some of the schools is something as easy as door hardware. So all of these old schools have the old knobs that turn. They don't meet ADA. The ADAs have to have the levers. We left that off. Somewhere you've got to stop. So we can't possibly do everything, but this is our recommendation for Indian Springs. So if you want, we can stop here and go back to any of the slides, and I can further explain why we did what we did, and if you have questions about why did we not do something else.
There's only one question I really have. Well, I got a couple. But I guess the question I have is, doesn't that ADA law requirements require us to fix all the ADA things before we do other modifications to the building? Don't we have to fix these before
So
we start?
what you typically do is that, as you can imagine, there's school districts all over the nation that are in the same exact boat. It's not school districts, it's post offices and any other state government building. So you have an action plan, and that's what you have now is an ADA action plan. And so we are trying to pick the most serious deficiencies. There in East Tennessee, it's extremely difficult to solve all ADA issues because you can't get from a parking lot into the building just because of the nature of our topography. But we're trying to pick on things like toilets. We should at least have an accessible way, a proper accessible way in the school, and toilets. Those are your major things. So yes, you're correct, but it's that same thing where do you stop? So the way that I understand it is that as long as you have an action plan, you will, you satisfy the requirement that you've identified it and you plan to, just what it says, fix it.
Okay, and thank you for answering that, because I remember reading something about the law, and it was saying that you had to have an action plan, you had to basically say how you're going to take care of it, but that if you were doing modifications and renovations, that you had to address the ADA requirements. So I was wanting to make sure that it's put in my mind, because it seems like if you're going to spend a significant amount of money, but you still need the ADA requirements, I don't want it to be told you have to go back and fix that.
Right, and so if you go back to the floor plan, we are, like I said, doing all of the gang toilets and replacing and putting in a proper ADA toilet in there now. The one area that is questionable is the pod area. That's a newer part to the school, and I believe that was 1980s. So they have attempted to put in a handicapped toilet, and they put the guardrails in and things like that, but it does not meet to the letter of the law, meaning that I need a stall that's 5 feet wide, 6 feet, actually 6'3", but anyway, it's that point. Maybe it's 5 by 6, but it's not exactly what they say in the ADA guidelines that it has to be. So it made an attempt at making it ADA compliant, but it's not to the letter of the law. So, in my opinion, this snapshot in time, a pod is good enough, but the other bathrooms are just aren't even close. And it's those judgment decisions, and it's really the same judgment decisions for everything that we talked about, because HVAC and electrical just go on and on with spending money. Stop. did look at that, and again, it was just a matter of the budget. You know, we've already got to 5 million, and so we can, remember at the beginning, I said if we do something else, I've got to take something else away. So all of these are just judgment issues. If that's something that is a wish that is stronger than one of these other wishes, you know, we can certainly do that. So that is definitely an ADA challenge for sure. You know, that the rest of the school can't get down to the gym because we have those steps, and what they have to do now is they have to go outside and back around. And that is not good. So, you know, at the desire, people maybe look at something and they're going to take something off to be able to make that work. So you may look down the road, you know, if I had to pick one, I would say, the last line I'm on of education number 5, we absolutely have to have a health system. Somebody that works on HVAC is going to say that's their number 1 priority. So it's just a matter of coming to an agreement what's the best way to address it in the way it's wonderful to solve that problem. No, that doesn't take care of all of them. Those are the worst ones. Well, we have different systems in the school, and so as you made additions, they put in different things. So if the spot area looks good. So we're looking at 1954. Yes.
I just want to make sure the board knew that. Thank you, Denise.
Okay, any more questions on Indian Springs?
Big question. Being in the new school, what it costs to build a school.
I can't answer that question until I know a little more of the program and all that kind of stuff, but I do know that if we're looking at an elementary school, you know, what we could have done, like for instance, we did East Middle School for 20 million. So I would say that the elementary school is pushing that now. You know, and of course it depends on the program, how many students and athletic fields and all that.
Price of property, we would have is
Mm-hmm. Right.
You were talking about basically making it a lot nicer as far as the ceiling upgrades, and it was only going to be the grayed out areas. Again, percentage-wise, is that how much of the school is that actually affecting?
So that area is approximately 2,400 square feet. The area that is the rectangle in the center of the school. And it's, if you kind of go back up one slide to the whole floor, I think I have a whole floor plan. Well, let's look at the site plan. So that's just the center section, basically, is what we're talking about, and that kindergarten room to the north.
So that's the 1954 area, right?
Yeah, yeah, but as far as like where we're putting the new finishes would be in that center section and the kindergarten room, the new kindergarten room. Mhm. Okay. Anything else for Indian Springs? All right, we'll move on to Mary Hughes. Mary Hughes is a very nice building, probably one of the nicer buildings that you have as far as the older category goes. It's in the historic district, so it has a whole different set of issues. Overall, this building has what I would call good bones. It's got a good exterior skin. It just is an aging building. It has aging mechanical system, electrical systems, and everything you would expect in a school that is that age. So we are looking more at HVAC and electrical in this building because this is, we feel like a higher concern than architectural items. So as far as architectural items go, well actually let me just stop on this. One of the things that was requested was to look and see if we could put in an elevator. This school is very difficult in that there are one-story building, two-story, and trying to find a point where you can attach to the different levels of the school, plus you've got like a basement level underneath. So if you see the green square in the middle, that's one suggestion for where an elevator might go. As we go down the list, this was not included in, this school also has a $5 million budget. It was not included in just because of what we feel like is the cost and the how difficult it would be to put this in construction-wise. However, it's still on the table for discussion if you feel like that is a high priority item. Also, on the front of the school, we really don't have a good way to get in. We have grand staircases. We've got on the far right side is the auditorium, the center section is administrative and academic, and then the left side is the gym. There is no handicapped accessibility on the front at all. Again, remember we said this is a historic district, it's an historic building. They do not like ramps and things on the front of historic buildings. There is a ramp on the rear. However, I feel like there should be another ramp somewhere on the front. So we've suggested, I don't know if you can see the green rectangle in the lower left corner, that there would be a ramp somewhere in that area, and that would at least get you into the gym area on the front. Now, that doesn't mean that it couldn't be flipped on the other side and come in the auditorium. There is an attempt at a handicap ramp at the auditorium. The issue that you have there is that you can get into the ground level, but then you can't go anywhere for there because there's steps out of the auditorium. So we would have to come back in and put, ramps in. And that's not to say, just like the other suggestion about a ramp, we could do that, but I'm going to present other things that, and again, mostly HVAC, electrical, and plumbing items that need to happen in the school that really are probably a good use of your $5 million at this point. So again, we'll go back to architectural items first. Go to the next slide. This is the same type thing with the handicap toilet upgrades. So in the school, there is a special education area that is in the front of the school. There's a couple special ed classes now. The photograph on the lower right side is a little skinny toilet that they are trying to use as a special education toilet. It does not in any way meet the needs of the special education children. So we've had that as a very high priority, and that is located, you'll see a little L-shaped green area just down just a little bit right there, so that it would be a decent size with a shower in it to properly care for these children. The other green areas that you see, there's 4 other areas, and these are gang toilets that, and when we say gang toilets, it's multiple fixtures of each sex, boy and girls, and we would put a handicapped toilet on each of these. Now, this is a really hard issue, and this is one, like Mr. Iverson talked about, as far as handicapped accessibility, how extensive do you go? This is a 2-story building. If we don't have an elevator, they can't get to the second floor, which is an issue. And if you can't get to the second floor, why would you have handicapped accessible toilets on the second floor? So at this particular snapshot in time, again, I've just put these on the first floor. If we had the money to put in the elevator and renovate the second floor, then we would put in the ADA toilets on the second floor. You'll see that in the lower little thumbnail photo there where the cursor is, that would be the side of the gym where we could come in with a handicap ramp. And again, there's not to say that it couldn't be on the other side of the school, but this is, we have money in there for one side of the school or the other. Next slide. Another issue that Mary Hughes has is that on the front of the school, there is a big maintenance item as far as the fascia and the gutter. It's a little hard to tell in this photograph, but all the way across the top, the gutter is failing. And every seam, it has brown crud, I guess for lack of an architectural term. It is destroying that fascia, and it needs to be replaced. The whole entire length of that fascia needs to be replaced, and that's approximately 140 linear feet. So again, we're not doing as many architectural items as we are suggesting at Indian Springs at East, but you'll see why, because we're eating up a huge part of the budget in the HVAC and electrical. So if we go on to the next slide. Now, talking about electrical items, it's similar in that we would do new upgrades to the lighting, putting in LED lighting, branch wiring, new communications wiring, electrical distribution, and also life safety system upgrades. This number is higher than Indian Springs just simply because you have 2 floors and it's more complicated, and the square footage to try to get all of these life safety issues that we need to resolve. For HVAC and plumbing, we have a couple of very large ticket items, and these are similar. There's window units in there now. We would remove the window units. There's a combination of HVAC problems. There's old radiators in the classroom, and we would remove the radiators. When you remove those, you also have to patch the wall, and you have to patch the floor, and you can see here we've got the same problem with the urinals, no ADA access, they're on a curb. We've got a boiler in very poor condition, so you can kind of read through the items on the list. These are very large ticket items. We've got $525,000 for air conditioning. We've got $1.1 million down on item number 6 to replace the steam boiler plant. So all of these things are maintenance things that you need to do in order to keep this building in the good shape that, you know, like I said, it's got great bones. So we really need to spend some money on the HVAC to keep it functional. So overall, same thing we as we did on Indian Springs, we have the digital control system. You know, whether or not that's the highest priority, we'll see. But in your, or you should make in your notes that I've got this rate at $5 million, but if we wanted to add an elevator, that would be an additional $300,000. So we would be over our budget 5.3. And again, our task was to keep this as close to the $5 million for each school as possible. And I also might add that in the budget, we also have put a 10% contingency on each line item. And we've also added in the soft cost. I think this was an oversight whenever we did the middle and high school that we didn't budget enough. We should have probably put in 10% contingency. And in today's world, that's just a minimum. It used to be that we would do 5%. But, you know, with the escalation that we're looking at, the 10%, that may not even be enough. And especially whenever you're doing a renovation. A renovation is, as you all know, I'm sure, is that once you get started on the renovation, you're going to find a gas line, something in the wall, something under the floor. That's just always happens. So let's stop right here and talk a little bit more about Mary Hughes. Is there anything on the wish list, or why did we not do something, or can we do something that we didn't talk about?
Is Mary Hughes on the historic list require more permits and additional expenses that's included here?
The way that I understand it is that as part of it is on the historic, in the historic district, and we have to get approval. And so when I'm talking about replacing the gutter and the fascia, if this was a school out in the country somewhere else, we might be able to come back in with an aluminum fascia and a cheaper. But the historic district wants us to put back in similar materials, and so this is a very nice school. So in order to put back those materials, it is a little bit more expensive, yes. And it is a little, you will have to put in a little nicer ramp than you could possibly put like they have on the back of the school. So I believe that they're really just looking at that front facade. Because as you go around to the back of the school, you'll see there's a metal fire exit and there's a wooden ramp on the back. You know, this is one of those things like, where do you stop? Really, you should replace that wooden ramp on the back, because a wooden ramp only lasts for so long, and that is in fair condition. And so, you know, it could create other liabilities, because as the wood warps and the handrails warp, they're not right, and then you might cause another ADA issue because of the condition of the ramp.
Do you have any idea how long it's going to sort of list, Charlie?
I don't know. I do know that you have to get approval to change anything outside. Interior, you don't have to have that approval. I don't know when it came into the historic district, but probably that building originally probably had a slate roof. Then it went to tin, and now it has shingles. So I don't know if they would require us to go back with a metal roof instead of shingles once that building is re-roofed. You know what I'm saying? I think it may have went to shingles before it became, but I don't know when it went into the historical district.
That's what I asked, because I think some things were done prior to going on the list. And now, with the additional expenses, going back to what it used to be.
I probably could put a metal roof, shingle roof, probably the same, you know what I'm saying? But they told me that anything outside looks like it needed approval, but inside we can do anything, and there's no approval needed on the interior. But I don't know when it actually was adopted into the historical district. Do you know, Andy?
I believe it's 2010.
Okay.
So one of the things that I also wanted to point out was that this is a classic example of where do you stop. I'm thinking that you would at least make the front look very nice. You'll see these two pictures are on the back side, and that railing is on the side of the building. It needs to be painted. I don't have the money in here right now to do that. On the, yeah, both of those, that's a fire escape stair. You can see it's in desperate need of painting. You know, again, I can't keep saying enough. It's like it's so hard to stretch this budget. We do as much as we can, but no matter what, I know that there's going to be citizens that say you spent $5 million, why couldn't you paint this railing? Why couldn't you paint that stair? It's just, you know, again, you need more money, that's why. So, but let me just throw it back out again. You can see that we have not spent as much money on architectural items in this school just because of the heavy numbers on the HVAC. Okay, any other questions? All right, let's go on to East. All right, this is a site plan of East High School. This, you know, as you well know, we have made some decent improvements to the athletic fields here in the last couple of years, but one of the things that really strikes me about East is that when you approach the school, it really looks dated. The front looks dated. It looks like it could use a facelift for sure. So I was studying this and thinking that we really need to do something to make this look like a more inviting entry, and also would like to look at the bus loop and how close the bus loop is to the existing entry. And that if we pulled that bus loop out into the grass, which is really kind of a wasted space now, that you could create a plaza up against the school. One of the days when I was out there was the senior day, and I felt like it was just very crowded. They had food trucks, and the seniors were trying to have cornhole and different events, and it was such a small little area of grass there that they could use to have that type of event. I felt like if you had the road pulled back a little more, you would have more of a plaza and more of a gathering space. And plus, like I said, it's a security issue that you don't have the cars right up against the building. So if we move on to the next slide, this is the floor plan of East. You would recognize the two round domes on either side, and the cafeteria is in the middle. So again, with the site plan, we'll look at the areas that are gray shaded. The gray shaded area where the cursor is now would be this new plaza area. So you would have a new canopy and a new entry. And then you can see in blue, and we'll zoom down on this in a minute, the blue part would be new administrative space. So what's nice about that is that we could now take a little bit of the administrative space and push it towards the blue area, and where you see that kind of golden rectangle, that could become a classroom, which the goal here is that if we could have some more classrooms in the main building, then we can get rid of some of the classrooms that are back in the vocational area and put the mainstream classrooms back in. Or it could be flex, it could be anything you want it to be. But another deficiency of East is that the science classrooms are way out of date, and they really need to have some upgrading. So recently, the lockers were removed from the two center sections there, on each side of the cafeteria, which created some great space there. So I was looking at putting in a new science lab on either side, or it could be a flex lab that, could be a CTE or whatever you wanted it to be. But the point is that you then open up two more classrooms that are in the academic pod. Where the point where the science classrooms are now in the pod, over there. So now you would have two additional spaces there. So now what you get is a total of 3 classroom spaces in the main building. Also in this building, we have 2 restrooms that are located, right there, and the other side. Which again, this is a case where you might say, do you have a handicapped restroom? And they would say, yes, they do, but it does not meet the letter of the handicapped code. So we would put 2 handicapped restrooms in that do meet code in the center section of the building. Then one smaller thing is that, I don't know if you can see it from the photograph there, the thumbnail that's on the right side, there is a room that, I'm not sure what the classroom is for, but it's right next to the library, that has a ship's ladder, maintenance ladder in the classroom. You have to climb up the ship's ladder and then do an acrobatic stunt, which that's Charlie on the ladder, to get the key in the door, to get it open, and to be able to jump in there just to get in the maintenance room, which is ridiculous. So we are proposing that we get that out of the classroom and put that in, make a little maintenance area where we can have a little shuttle up to that loft, because it's a very nice mechanical space once you get in it, but it's just not safe how you can get in. Again, that's a small budget item, so felt like we could check that box. So let's go to the next slide where we zoom in a little bit more on the entry. So again, the blue area, what we're looking at is that this would be new administrative space, and it also, when you come into East now, it's very cramped whenever you first come into the building. You've made do with the security, but it could be a lot nicer if you had more gathering space whenever you come into the building, and it's a 2-story space to give you some presence. So Evelyn, if you could show the size of what it is now, that's where you come in now, and then the blue area that is to the right would be a nice new vestibule there. So you come in, you're in a non-secure space at that point, and then you get buzzed into the secure space. And it gives you a lot of room there. Again, as a security issue, it's just too cramped when you first come in the door. Also, what happens is you can see the arched sidewalk where kind of just show that whole arch where the buses used to be, and you'll see how we pulled it out. Yeah, so the buses are out to the front, so that you can see how much plaza area is created there. Also, there was some visitor parking in that area that's white, and now we've put that same visitor parking back. So all we've simply done is just use some grass space that's really not used for anything right now, and just pulled that out and given you a little more room there. You can see from the photograph on the top, right there, that is the existing entry with a makeshift handicap ramp that is not attractive. The steps are not attractive, just really trying to see if we can freshen it up a little bit. So the next slides will show some concepts there. On the top is the existing photograph of what the school looks like now. We're looking at trying to see if we can create a new entry that will really give it some presence. Again, put a decent handicap ramp in. Whether that new entry is that shape or a single slope or a rounded top, you know, we can look at those different options. But the point is that it would be a new elevated center section to really give you some presence. On the bottom, you can see the two domes flanking either side, and that shows you the scale of the entry from far away. Okay, let's go to the next one. So these are some 3Ds just showing what it would look like, again, in relationship to the domes and the buses and the drop-off. You can see here that the grass area, we still have it, we still have room for some trees and so forth. It's just not as long as it used to be to get into the school. And again, you still have the visitors parking and the ramp, and you see on the lower level what it looks like from the parking lot area. And then the next slide. So these are just two different views, one looking from the right side and one looking from the left side, just to give you a feel for how much more space you would have on the front of the school. I think, yeah, okay. So now let's talk about numbers and how we got to these numbers. So for East High School, we have $15 million budget. So you can see that we've done a lot more architectural because we have a lot more money. So again, number one on the list, let's get the handicapped toilets upgraded. The number two is the exterior ramp and the step improvements. And then number three is to add this addition, entry addition and administrative addition. And then we're going to have to come back in, renovate the classrooms, renovate the science rooms. The science rooms are going to need all new casework, and of course that's an expensive item, but we feel like it's very important to have decent science labs in the school. And we have throughout the school, in this case, we've done finishes and painting in the entire main building. So in the other schools with the $5 million budget, we did not have the money to do the whole school. In this one we are. However, we do not have any money on the vocational building. This is just the main building only. We did leave in one of the line item number 7 to replace all the door hardware to ADA standards. One of the wish lists was to create a screening wall at the cafeteria and upgrades there, so we put some money in for that. And then site work upgrades, which is the new parking area that we showed you in the plaza. And then a small item was to add that ship's ladder in their classroom adjacent to the library. So those are the architectural items. Then if we move on to electrical and HVAC, electrical items are, very similar, same kind of thing, branch wirings, communication upgrades, lighting upgrades to all LED, same thing with life safety upgrades. And again, I think I've already mentioned, but there is a report, an electrical report and an HVAC report that goes into further detail on each of these line items. The HVAC and plumbing is, like we talked about, we're going to replace the laboratory sinks in all the science classrooms. We are going to replace the cast iron waste piping with PVC, replace the oil-fired boilers and water heater with new dual fuel LP gas. We're going to convert the 2-pipe system into a 4-pipe system so that HVAC systems in the school can be heating while the other in cooling mode and vice versa. That's a huge line item. So if you add all those up and add the contingency and the soft cost, you'll see we're just under the 15 million. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions of how we got to that total.
Janine, I have a question. Can you expound just a little bit more on when you say science classroom renovations? Can you expand on that just a little bit more?
Yes.
What does that include?
So if we go back, I don't know if you can see the photograph. It was the last slide you were on. I'm sorry, the other way. There's a little blow-up of a science classroom there. The countertop is in very poor condition. The faucets don't work, the hoods don't work. The entire science room is in poor shape. And so we would do a total redo and put in proper casework, proper hoods, proper sinks, faucets, and so forth.
Basically gutting it.
Gutting it and starting over. Yeah, ripping out all the casework and starting over again.
I know that there was a wish list and there was some things that you had to drop off, but just with that line 4 in the HVAC, that's a huge line item. Is that really the best, the biggest thing? I mean, because I'm not sure how big of a difference that'll make. I'm just curious because that's such a huge number. It's as much as we're spending on anything.
Right, right. Well, of course, it's, you know, twice or 3 times as big. So the numbers are bigger in that effect as well. But again, you have to look at this school was, what is it, 1980s?
1968.
68, okay. So, you know, it's just all of the systems in here need to be upgraded, and that's the ticket item, that's how much it costs. And really, HVAC is one of the things that's gone up the most in building materials, and not only just the cost, but also the availability in trying to get the materials in. Sometimes we're, like on switchgear right now, in some mechanical units, we're waiting a year to get them in.
Compare the HVAC system at East Middle with this proposed there, corporate under East. I know it's about the same amount of money, about $5 million, I believe. This is a different system, is it not?
Yes, and Charlie may have to help me on this. I'm not a mechanical expert, but do you? Yeah.
When it goes standalone units that they're talking about doing it, East Middle,
Central.
I'm sorry, Central Middle.
Yeah.
But it's the same 2-pipe system to a 4-pipe system, is it not?
Yeah.
I guess my real question is, the best proposal that they had was to go to those standalone units, and here we've got prices for 4-pipe system. Why are we not looking at the same type of system there that we looked at for Central Middle?
Isn't that a much cheaper option?
Yeah, it is.
This is a much more efficient, nicer option.
And one thing about East is right now it's on heating. It's the only building I have that has actual heating oil.
Right.
So we'd have to convert that to propane. And actually this system also, it's water source. We still have to, it sends up to the VOTEC too and takes care of that building. You know?
It was my understanding that the proposal for Central Middle, the most efficient option was to go with the standalone units. I'm confused as to.
Yeah. We was trying to get, and I didn't actually confer that much with the HVAC engineer when they went through this building, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, the standalones to keep from disrupting the process at Central is what they were proposing to do, and stay out of the interior hallways and stuff like that.
Which one's cheaper?
I would have to go back and look and see what they come up with. They never did put it out to bid, it was just a projection they did, you know what I'm saying?
But certainly, I mean, we can challenge the mechanical engineer and ask him, you know, but he didn't have this other information or know this information. What we asked him to do was to provide his recommendation, and this was his recommendation. So if we want to challenge him and look at another system, I'm sure we could do that.
I think that's the one where the switchgear was a year out, if I'm not mistaken, when we got the prices back.
One thing you just said, though, Charlie, is about it changing it over to propane versus the heating oil. I mean, isn't that heating oil just a huge expense too? Wouldn't that save money over time? I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, it might be a little more expensive to do, but it's going to save quite a bit over the course. I mean, we're not trying to build something that's going to last a few years. We're looking at 50 years or whatever.
Is there any other questions on East?
Just curious.
I'll try to see if we can get that question answered. All right, any other questions on any of the schools or any of the budgets? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Denise. At this time, would there be any further questions for Denise? This is a lot of information. It's not anything that is on the board agenda for any action this evening. Certainly, this is work session number 1. I anticipate additional work sessions in regard to this, and potentially other questions that you might have as you have some time, as you take some time to digest this information, review, and pose any questions that you might have to Charlie, myself, or Denise. Would there be anything else on this at this time?
Is this just for free money?
And what I have prepared for you additionally, in the back of your book, if you'll look at those 2 folded pages, the first page is an accounting of our ESSER funds from 1 through 3. As you can see as we go down through there, ESSER 1, our beginning budget with ESSER 1 was $2,130,586.57, which has to be spent here September 22. And we've done a pretty good job spending that money down. We actually have a balance of $32,000 and some change there that is currently obligated for personnel. So for all practical purposes, we are complete with ESSER 1, or CARES as it was better known at that time. Moving to the second portion of your page is ESSER 2. Our total budget was $9,176,960.79. These monies must be spent by next June 2023. As you can see, I've got spent to date and what our balance is. I have a column there for expenditures, a column for items that we budgeted, and a column for remaining dollars. The projects are listed there as well. Anything that is highlighted are projects that have been complete or are obligated at this time. Anything that is white are projects which are on this list, but for one reason or another has not been completed. There are things here that there has been an expressed interest in that I've included, and items that I think we can continue to look at and move forward with. But as you can see, and it was mentioned just a few minutes ago, Central Middle HVAC, what we had budgeted, and you can see that the same amount is remaining there. Denise made mention of the switchgear situation, which is what came back to us from our county purchasing agent, Chris Davis, that we couldn't get those pieces and parts. And but that gives you an idea of where we are on ESSER 2. Certainly, the potential for some of those monies to be moved one way or the other, depending upon the desire of this board. The last item on this page is Roman numeral 3 and ESSER 3. Our ESSER $3 were and are $20,610,150. Must be spent by June 2024. These deadlines are very worrisome and looming as we sit here today. Out of this money, we've spent $45,000, and that is the fees that we just spent for this analysis on these 3 schools. Other than that, we haven't spent this money, that, with the 80% that can be spent on capital projects. Now, the important piece here is the other 20% had to be spent on learning loss. And there's no way to move that money or anything else. And again, we have had many discussions on how we've spent that money, but the allocated budget for learning loss is $4.1 million. And you can see that leaves approximately 16.5 left for capital projects in ESSER 3. Deneen has presented us a laundry list of about $25 million altogether. So certainly some things to pick and choose from if that would be the desire of the board. Or it may be, we need more information. What about this? What about that? But that's the dollars that you have to work with sitting here in front of you. So as we continue our discussion about ESSER, and again, I'm going to ask for another work session just to have priorities moving forward and do an analysis ourselves of this list. And again, Deneen has done a great job. She's come forward with a lot of great suggestions, but it may be that we ask her for additional information. And what can she come back to us with? The next page that you'll see is just a page for your information to bring you up to the IPLC grant. I get questions on that from time to time. But that just gives you some information there as to how we're moving along with that grant project as well. And again, those items that are highlighted have already been finished, such as the paving. We're complete there. We've utilized all the money from that grant that could be used on capital projects has already been spent. So again, a lot of information in this notebook for you this evening, not anything that I would expect anyone to be able to start seeing one thing or another. So at this time, and what I would like to do is take just a brief break of about 15 minutes unless the board has questions and wants to prolong that, and then after the break, come back.
Just one quick question. Whenever we say that it has to be spent by June 2023, what does that truly mean? Does it have to be allocated, have to be obligated? What does that truly mean? It doesn't have to be completed, right?
It is my understanding, and Dr. Morehouse is grinning at me back there, it has to be obligated.
Thank you.
And it would be best if it was spent. Any additional questions? Okay, at this time, let's take about 15 minutes and then come back, and I've got just a few minutes of, well, let me look real quick before we do that, just to see if there's anything else here. Prior to our agenda for our board meeting, we've had quite a bit of conversation and discussion on most of the items on here, so I did think Mr. Jones wanted to take a little bit of time during the work session. We still want to do that with them. Okay, he's saying no, so we'll just delay our discussion for our board meeting, and I'll try to be more detailed during our work meeting. Our board meeting, since we've not had much discussion on our agenda items at this time. If that meets the pleasure of the board. All right, thank you. We'll come back at 6:30 to start our regular monthly August board meeting.